"Get out and don't come back!" my husband screamed, shoving me onto the wet pavement in my bathrobe at 2 a.m. The rain was coming down in sheets, soaking through the thin fabric in seconds. I was already looking for a rock to smash our living room window when the porch light next door flickered on. An elderly woman I had only seen once or twice stepped out under an umbrella. She looked at me, then at the door my husband had just slammed, and said calmly, "My daughter is the hospital administrator where your husband works. Come inside, dear. By this time tomorrow, he will be the one crying in the rain." But let me take you back to where it all started. I heard his car pull into the driveway just after midnight. I had been sitting at the kitchen table for 3 hours, staring at our bank statement, watching numbers that made no sense. The front door opened, and my husband walked in whistling some tune I didn't recognize. He was in a good mood, which lately meant something was wrong. "You're still up?" he asked, tossing his keys on the counter. He didn't look at me. He went straight to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer. "Where were you?" My voice came out quieter than I intended. "Work thing. You know how it is. End of the fiscal quarter." He took a long sip and finally turned to face me. "Why do you look like that? Someone die?" I slid the bank statement across the table toward him. "Explain this." He didn't pick it up. He didn't even look at it. "Explain what?" "The $40,000 that's missing from our savings. The credit card charges at hotels in Miami when you were supposedly at conferences in Chicago. The jewelry store purchase for $1,800. And I haven't received any jewelry." For a moment, his face went blank. Then he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed off the kitchen tiles. "So, you're going through my accounts now? That's what we've come to?" "Our accounts?" I corrected him. "Joint accounts. Money I helped earn when I was still working." "When you were still working?" He slammed the beer bottle down so hard I thought it would shatter. "That was 15 years ago, Vivian. 15 years you've been sitting in this house doing nothing while I built my career. You think that entitles you to interrogate me?" I felt my hands shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "I think being your wife for 32 years entitles me to know why our retirement savings are disappearing." He moved toward me then, and something in his eyes made me push back from the table. I had seen my husband angry before, but this was different. This was cold. "You want to know where the money went?" "Fine. It went to someone who actually appreciates me. Someone who doesn't nag and complain and look at me like I'm a disappointment every single day." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're having an affair." "I'm having a life," he spat back. "Something you wouldn't understand because you stopped living years ago. Look at you, sitting here in your old bathrobe, playing detective instead of sleeping like a normal person. You're pathetic." I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but I stood. "I want you to leave." He laughed again. "You want me to leave? This is my house. My name is on the mortgage. My salary pays the bills. You want someone to leave?" He grabbed my arm and started pulling me toward the front door. "Then you leave." I struggled against him, but he was stronger. He had always been stronger. "Richard, stop. You're hurting me." He didn't stop. He dragged me through the living room, unlocked the front door, and shoved me out onto the porch. The rain hit me immediately, cold and relentless. It was March in Seattle, and the temperature couldn't have been more than 45 degrees. "Richard, please." I pounded on the door. "My phone is inside. My wallet. Everything." His voice came through the wood, muffled but clear. "Should have thought about that before you started snooping. Maybe a night out there will teach you to mind your own business." The porch light went off, then the living room light, then the bedroom light upstairs. He was going to bed. He was actually going to bed while I stood outside in the freezing rain in nothing but a bathrobe and slippers. I looked around desperately. Our neighborhood was nice, quiet, the kind of place where everyone minded their own business. Most houses were dark. No one was going to see me, and even if they did, would they help? Or would they assume it was some domestic dispute best left alone? I spotted a decorative rock near our flower bed. It was heavy, meant to look natural, but obviously fake. I picked it up, testing its weight. I could break the window. I would have to break the window. Hypothermia was a real risk, and my pride wasn't worth dying for. I raised the rock above my head, already calculating the cost of the repair, already dreading the humiliation of explaining to a glazier why I needed emergency service at 2 a.m. That's when the light came on next door. The house beside ours had always been something of a mystery. It was one of the largest on the street, a beautiful craftsman, with a wraparound porch and gardens that were professionally maintained. An elderly woman lived there alone, or so I assumed. I had seen her occasionally, getting into a town car driven by someone else, always dressed impeccably despite her age. We had never spoken beyond a polite wave. She stepped onto her porch now, a large umbrella in one hand and something that looked like a blanket draped over her arm. She walked down her steps, across her yard, and up to where I stood, frozen with a rock over my head, like some kind of deranged garden gnome. "Put that down, dear," she said. Her voice was calm, commanding, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I have a guest room with clean sheets and a hot shower. You're coming with me." I lowered the rock. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you. My husband and I had a disagreement and—" I heard the disagreement. She unfolded the blanket, which turned out to be a cashmere throw, and draped it around my shoulders. "I heard every word he said to you. The walls in these old houses are thinner than people think, especially when someone is shouting." I felt my face flush with shame despite the cold. I'm sure it sounded worse than it was. It sounded exactly as bad as it was. She took my arm, gently but firmly, and began guiding me toward her house. "I know who you are, Vivian Chen. I know who your husband is, too. Richard Chen, Chief Financial Officer at Cascade Memorial Hospital." I stumbled slightly on the wet grass. "How do you know that?" She smiled, a slight curve of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Because my daughter, Margaret Hollister, is the CEO of Cascade Memorial. And because I, Eleanor Hollister, personally funded the construction of the hospital's new cardiac wing." She paused at her front door and turned to look me directly in the eyes. "Which means your husband's entire career exists at my family's pleasure." She opened the door and ushered me inside before I could respond. The warmth hit me immediately, wrapping around my frozen skin like an embrace. The interior of her home was exactly what I would have expected: elegant, traditional, filled with antiques that looked museum quality. "The guest bathroom is at the top of the stairs, first door on the left," she said. "There are towels in the cabinet and a robe on the back of the door. Take as long as you need. I'll make tea." I wanted to argue, to insist that I was fine, that I could handle this myself. But I was shaking so violently my teeth were chattering, and the warmth of her house had revealed just how cold I had actually become. So I nodded and climbed the stairs. The shower helped. The hot water thawed my muscles and gave me time to think. My husband was having an affair. He had taken $40,000 from our savings. He had thrown me out of my own home in the middle of the night. And now I was standing in a stranger's bathroom, wearing a stranger's robe, about to drink tea with a woman who apparently had significant power over my husband's career. It felt like a fever dream. It felt like the beginning of something I couldn't control. When I came downstairs, Eleanor was sitting in the living room with a tea service laid out on the coffee table. She had changed into a silk dressing gown, her silver hair still perfectly coiffed despite the late hour. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Better?" she asked. "Much. Thank you." I sat down and accepted the cup she offered. The tea was hot and strong, with a hint of honey. "Mrs. Hollister, I appreciate your kindness, but I don't want to impose. I can call a friend, find somewhere else to stay. At 2:30 in the morning? Don't be ridiculous." She took a sip of her own tea. "Besides, I have a proposition for you." I froze with the cup halfway to my lips. "A proposition?" "I've done some research on you, Vivian. Before you married Richard Chen, you were Vivian Park, one of the most promising healthcare compliance auditors in the Pacific Northwest. You uncovered a Medicare fraud scheme at Swedish Hospital that led to federal indictments. You were on track to become a department head, possibly more." I set the cup down carefully. "That was a long time ago. 15 years. The same amount of time you've been, as your husband so charmingly put it, sitting at home doing nothing." Her eyes were sharp despite her age, missing nothing. "Why did you quit?" The question brought back memories I had spent years trying to bury. Richard asked me to. He said his career was taking off, that we didn't need two incomes, that I should focus on the home. "And you agreed?" I thought. I paused, trying to find words for something I had never spoken aloud. I thought it was what marriage meant. Compromise. Support. I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he would be happy, and we would be happy together. And how did that work out? I looked down at my hands. They were finally warm, no longer shaking, but I could still feel the phantom sting of the cold rain. Obviously not well. Eleanor leaned forward. I'm going to tell you something, Vivian, and I want you to listen carefully. 6 months ago, my daughter came to me with concerns about the hospital's finances. There were discrepancies in the accounts, money that should have been there but wasn't. She hired an external auditing firm, but they found nothing. The discrepancies continued. My auditor's instincts, dormant for 15 years, suddenly stirred. What kind of discrepancies? Vendor payments that don't match contracts. Equipment purchases for items that never arrived. Consultant fees paid to companies that seem to exist only on paper. She paused. And all of it flowing through the office of the chief financial officer. The implications settled over me like a second layer of cold. You think Richard is stealing from the hospital. I think someone is stealing from the hospital. And your husband is either responsible or complicit. But I can't prove it. The external auditors couldn't find the trail. It's too well hidden. And you think I can find it? I think you're one of the few people who could. She stood up and walked to a small desk in the corner of the room. She returned with a folder and handed it to me. I've been watching you for months, Vivian. Watching you through your kitchen window, alone night after night while your husband claimed to be working late. Watching you tend your garden with the same precision you once applied to spreadsheets. Watching you waste away in a marriage that was slowly killing your spirit. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of financial documents, pages of numbers that meant nothing to me without context, but promised something larger. I was going to approach you eventually, Eleanor continued. Offer you a job, a chance to use your skills again. But then tonight happened, and I realized I couldn't wait any longer. Why not go to the police? If you suspect embezzlement, because I need proof. Concrete, irrefutable proof. And because she hesitated for the first time since I had met her, because I need to know how deep this goes, my daughter appointed Richard Chen to his position. If he's been stealing from the hospital, it reflects on her judgment. I need to understand the full scope before I take action. I looked at the documents in my hands. The numbers were starting to come into focus, patterns emerging from the chaos like shapes in a magic eye puzzle. Even if I find something, it might take months. You'll have full access to the hospital's financial systems, an office of your own, a salary that reflects your expertise. She sat down again, folding her hands in her lap, and a place to stay. Here, in this house, for as long as you need. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. Why would you do all this for a stranger? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had softened almost imperceptibly. Because 45 years ago, I was you. A woman whose husband told her she was nothing, whose husband took everything she had and tried to throw her away. The difference is that no one helped me. I had to claw my way back alone. She met my eyes. I swore that if I ever had the chance to help another woman in that position, I would. Consider this me keeping that promise. I thought about the cold rain still pounding against the windows. I thought about my husband upstairs in our bed, sleeping soundly after throwing me out like garbage. I thought about the $40,000 he had spent on another woman while I counted coupons at the grocery store. And I thought about who I used to be, before I let him convince me I was worthless. I'll do it, I said. Eleanor smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow, we go to war. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in Eleanor's guest room, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in my head. By morning, I had a preliminary plan. Eleanor's driver took me to the hospital at 8 o'clock. I walked through the front doors wearing clothes Eleanor had provided, professional and understated, and made my way to the administrative wing. Margaret Hollister, Eleanor's daughter and the hospital CEO, was waiting for me. She was younger than I expected, mid-50s, with her mother's sharp eyes and a handshake like a vice. Mrs. Chen, my mother speaks highly of you. Please, call me Vivian. Vivian, then. I've set up an office for you in the compliance department. You'll have access to everything, every account, every record, every contract going back 10 years. IT has already configured your credentials. She led me through a maze of corridors to a small but private office with a window overlooking the parking garage. There was a computer on the desk, a stack of file folders, and a laminated badge with my photo that must have been pulled from old records. "One thing," Margaret said, pausing at the door. "Your husband doesn't know about this. As far as anyone is concerned, you're a consultant brought in for a routine compliance review. Nothing unusual. And when I see him in the halls, you're professional. You're civil. You give nothing away." Her expression hardened. "Can you do that?" I thought about the way he had looked at me last night, the contempt in his voice when he called me pathetic. "I can do that." She left. I sat down at the desk, logged into the system, and began to work. The first week was reconnaissance. I learned the hospital's financial structure, identified the key players, mapped out the flow of money from insurance companies and government programs through various accounts, and eventually to vendors and employees. It was like learning a new language, one I had once spoken fluently but had allowed to rust. I saw my husband twice during that week. The first time, he walked past my office without noticing me. The second time, our eyes met in the cafeteria. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, anger, and then a carefully constructed mask of indifference. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. On the 8th day, I found the first thread. It was a vendor called Midwest Medical Supplies. According to the records, the hospital had been purchasing surgical equipment from them for 3 years, roughly $200,000 per quarter. The invoices were pristine, approved by the purchasing department, signed off by the CFO. But when I cross-referenced the vendor's information with state business registries, something strange emerged. Midwest Medical Supplies had been incorporated just 4 years ago. Its registered address was a UPS store in Indianapolis, and its registered agent was a woman named Denise Farmer. The name meant nothing to me at first. I ran it through the hospital's employee database and got no hits. I searched public records and found a LinkedIn profile. Denise Farmer, administrative assistant, Cascade Memorial Hospital. She worked in the finance department. She worked directly for my husband. I dug deeper. Denise Farmer was 34 years old, divorced, with a degree from a community college. She had started at the hospital 5 years ago as a temp and been promoted to a permanent position 3 years ago, right around the time Midwest Medical Supplies was incorporated. I found her social media accounts. They told a story that no LinkedIn profile ever could: vacations to Hawaii and the Caribbean, a new car, a Mercedes, designer clothes, and expensive restaurants. An apartment in a building that charged $4,000 a month in rent, all on a salary of $52,000 a year. I printed everything, then I started looking at other vendors. By the end of the second week, I had identified 6 shell companies funneling money out of the hospital. Total estimated theft, over $4 million in 3 years. And every single invoice, every single payment, had been approved by Richard Chen. But I still didn't have proof that he was the mastermind rather than an unwitting accomplice. I needed to connect him directly to the money. That connection came from an unexpected source. I was working late one night, cross-referencing bank routing numbers, when there was a knock on my office door. I looked up to find a young man standing in the doorway, maybe 25, with the anxious look of someone about to do something terrifying. "Mrs. Chen?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes? I'm Tyler Morrison. I work in accounts payable." He glanced down the hallway as if expecting someone to appear. "Can I talk to you?" It's about what you're investigating." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Close the door." He sat down, clutching a manila folder to his chest. "I know what you're looking for. I've known something was wrong for almost a year, but I didn't know who to tell. Mr. Chen, everyone is afraid of him. And his wife, He stopped, realizing what he was saying. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." "His wife is sitting right in front of you," I said calmly. "And I'm more interested in seeing him held accountable than in protecting his reputation. What do you have?" Tyler opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were copies of checks, wire transfers, and bank statements. I process payments. It's my job to make sure the money goes where it's supposed to go. About a year ago, I noticed that some payments were being routed to accounts that didn't match our vendor records. When I asked about it, Mr. Chen called me into his office and told me that I was new, that I didn't understand how things worked, and that if I ever questioned his decisions again, he would make sure I never worked in finance anywhere in this state. I took the documents from him, scanning them quickly. Wire transfers to offshore accounts, payments broken into smaller amounts to avoid reporting requirements, and handwritten notes in the margins that I recognized instantly. My husband's handwriting. "This is everything I've been able to gather," Tyler said. "I was too scared to come forward before, but then you showed up, and I heard you were asking questions, and I thought maybe you did the right thing." I told him, "This is exactly what I needed." I worked through the night, piecing together the final elements of the puzzle. By morning, I had a complete picture. My husband had been stealing from the hospital for over 4 years, using shell companies and fake vendors to siphon money into accounts he controlled. Denise Farmer wasn't just his administrative assistant. She was his partner in crime and, based on the intimate photos I found on a shared cloud account, his mistress. Together, they had stolen over $5 million. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was where the money had gone. I found the real estate records at 3 a.m, a house in San Diego, purchased 18 months ago, title in the name of Denise Farmer. A condo in Miami, purchased last year, same thing. And most recently, a deposit on a house in the Cayman Islands, in both their names. He wasn't just stealing. He was building a new life, a life without me. I sat back in my chair and stared at the evidence spread across my desk. The rage I had expected didn't come. Instead, I felt something colder, something more focused. I picked up my phone and called Eleanor. The Cascade Memorial Hospital Foundation Gala was the social event of the season. Every year, the hospital's biggest donors gathered in the grand ballroom of the downtown Marriott to celebrate their generosity and write more checks. My husband always attended. This year would be no different. Eleanor's plan was simple. We would present the evidence at the gala, in front of everyone who mattered, in front of the board of directors and major donors and media representatives. There would be no quiet resignation, no swept-under-the-rug departure. Richard Chen would be destroyed publicly and completely. I had 3 days to prepare. On the second day, everything almost fell apart. I was in my office reviewing the presentation when the door burst open. My husband stood in the doorway, his face red with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He slammed the door behind him. "I just got a call from IT. Someone has been accessing restricted financial files that only the CFO should have access to. Want to guess whose credentials were flagged?" I kept my face neutral. "I'm conducting a routine compliance review. I have authorization from the CEO. Compliance review." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I don't know what you're really doing? You think I don't know that old woman put you up to this? I don't know what you're talking about." He moved closer, looming over my desk. "I'm going to make this very simple, Vivian. Whatever you think you've found, it's nothing. You're nothing. You're a washed-up housewife playing detective, and if you don't stop this right now, I will make sure you regret it." I looked up at him, at this man I had loved for 32 years, and I felt nothing but disgust. "Is that what you told Tyler Morrison when he asked about the irregular payments?" His face went pale. "Tyler? What did he—" "He told me everything, Richard. He showed me everything." I stood up so we were face to face. "I know about Midwest Medical Supplies. I know about Denise Farmer. I know about the house in San Diego and the condo in Miami and the place in the Caymans. I know everything." For a moment, he looked genuinely afraid. Then the mask came back down, harder than before. "You have no proof. Without hard evidence, it's your word against mine, and who do you think they'll believe? The CFO who built this hospital's financial department from the ground up, or his bitter, jealous wife? I guess we'll find out at the gala." His eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't try me." He stared at me for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. I sat down heavily, my heart pounding. I had shown my hand too early. I had let anger get the better of me. Now he would have 2 days to prepare, to cover his tracks, to come up with some explanation. I called Eleanor immediately. "He knows," I said. I confronted him. I shouldn't have, but he was standing right in front of me and I couldn't. Calm down. Her voice was steady, reassuring. Tell me exactly what happened, I told her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. This could actually work in our favor, she said finally. A cornered animal makes mistakes. He'll try to destroy evidence, which means he'll create a digital trail. He'll try to get to Tyler Morrison, which means we need to protect him. And he'll probably reach out to Denise Farmer, which means we can track those communications. How? Leave that to me. Just focus on the presentation. Be ready for Friday night. Friday arrived faster than I expected. I spent the day at Eleanor's house, rehearsing what I would say, reviewing the slides one last time. At 6 o'clock, I put on the dress Eleanor had chosen for me, a deep blue gown that made me look like someone powerful, someone who mattered. Remember, Eleanor said as her driver pulled up to the Marriott, you don't speak until the presentation. You don't react to anything he says or does. You are calm, you are professional, and you are absolutely certain of your evidence. What if he tries to stop me? She smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. He won't get the chance. The ballroom was packed. I spotted my husband immediately, standing near the bar with a group of men in expensive suits. Denise Farmer was with him, wearing a red dress that left little to the imagination. They weren't touching, weren't even standing particularly close, but I could see the familiarity between them, the way she leaned toward him when she spoke, the way his hand briefly touched the small of her back. I watched them for a moment, waiting to feel something. Betrayal, jealousy, pain. But there was nothing. I had already mourned this marriage. I had already let it go. Margaret Hollister found me at my table. Everything is in place. The presentation will start at 8:30, right after the chairman's speech. I'll introduce you as our new Director of Compliance. Director of Compliance? Consider it a promotion. She squeezed my shoulder. You've earned it. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of small talk and canapes. I watched my husband work the room, shaking hands, slapping backs, playing the role of the successful executive. He didn't look worried. If anything, he looked confident, relaxed, certain that whatever I had planned would fail. At 8 o'clock, the chairman of the board took the stage and began his speech about the hospital's achievements and future plans. I barely heard a word. I was focused on the door behind the stage, where Eleanor had told me to wait. At 8:20, the chairman wrapped up his remarks and introduced Margaret Hollister. She walked to the podium, thanked the donors, praised the staff, and then turned to the topic of financial accountability. As many of you know, we take our fiduciary responsibilities very seriously. This year, we engaged in a comprehensive compliance review to ensure that every dollar donated to this hospital is being used as intended. She paused, letting the words sink in. I'm pleased to introduce the leader of that review, our new Director of Compliance, Vivian Chen. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw my husband's head snap toward the stage, his face registering shock for a split second before he controlled it. I walked to the podium. The lights were bright, the faces before me a sea of expectation and confusion. I found Eleanor in the crowd. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Good evening, I said. My voice was steady, stronger than I had expected. What I'm about to show you represents the findings of a 6-week investigation into financial irregularities at Cascade Memorial Hospital. I clicked the first slide, a chart showing the flow of money from hospital accounts to the shell companies. Over the past 4 years, approximately $5.3 million has been diverted from this hospital through a network of fraudulent vendors. The second slide, images of the shell company registrations, the UPS store addresses, the names of the registered agents. These companies exist only on paper. They provide no goods, no services. They exist solely to receive money stolen from your donations. I heard a commotion near the bar. My husband was trying to move toward the stage, but 2 men in suits were blocking his way. Security, I realized. Eleanor had thought of everything. The mastermind of this scheme is someone you all know and trust. Someone who has sat in this room year after year, accepting your gratitude and your praise while systematically looting this institution. I clicked the third slide. My husband's photo appeared on the screen, along with images of his signatures on the fraudulent invoices, records of wire transfers to offshore accounts, and photos of the properties purchased with the stolen money. Richard Chen, Chief Financial Officer of Cascade Memorial Hospital, has been stealing from you. He has been stealing from patients who trust this hospital with their lives. And he has been doing it with the help of his mistress, Denise Farmer, an administrative assistant he hired specifically to facilitate this fraud. A fourth slide. Photos of Denise at the beach house in San Diego. Screen captures of their communications, explicit enough to remove any doubt about the nature of their relationship. The ballroom erupted. People were shouting, pointing, pushing toward the stage. I saw Denise Farmer trying to slip out a side door, only to be stopped by more security. I saw my husband still struggling against the men holding him, his face a mask of rage. The evidence has been provided to law enforcement, I continued, raising my voice above the chaos. Arrests will be made tonight. But I wanted you, the people who have supported this hospital, to know the truth first. You deserve to see exactly who has been betraying your trust. I stepped back from the podium. Margaret Hollister took my place, announcing that the hospital was cooperating fully with authorities and that measures were being put in place to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. I walked off the stage and straight to my husband. He was no longer struggling. He stood perfectly still, the security guards on either side of him, his face drained of all color. When he saw me approaching, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger anymore. Fear. You destroyed me, he said. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. No, Richard. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it. 2 police officers appeared and led him away. I watched him go. This man I had given 32 years of my life to, and I felt something shift inside me. Not closure, not yet. But the beginning of it. Eleanor found me standing alone by the window, watching the police cars pull away. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it carefully before answering. I feel awake. For the first time in 15 years, I feel like myself again. She nodded, as if this was exactly what she expected. What will you do now? I turned to look at her, this woman who had pulled me out of the rain and given me back my life. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to protect this hospital, and I'm going to make sure no one else ever has the chance to do what he did. Eleanor smiled. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Welcome to Twisted VRX Stories. I share new life stories here every day. If you enjoyed this one, please hit subscribe and like the video. Now, let's continue. The aftermath was messy, as these things always are. Richard was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. Denise Farmer pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence and testimony against him. The properties they had purchased were seized, the offshore accounts frozen. Most of the stolen money was eventually recovered. The divorce was final within 6 months. I didn't ask for alimony. I didn't need it. I had my salary, my self-respect, and a sense of purpose I had forgotten I was capable of feeling. 2 years later, I became the Chief Compliance Officer for the entire Hollister Healthcare Network, which had grown to include 7 hospitals across 3 states. I built a department from scratch, hired talented young people like Tyler Morrison, and created systems that would make fraud nearly impossible to hide. Eleanor passed away last spring, peacefully, in her sleep. She left me her house, the one where she had taken me in that rainy night. I still live there, still tend the gardens, still think of her every time I look out the window at the house where I used to live. It belongs to a young family now. I see them sometimes, the husband and wife playing with their children in the yard. They wave when they see me, friendly and oblivious to the history contained within those walls. I wave back. And then I go inside and get ready for work. Because the woman who stood in the rain that night, the woman her husband called pathetic and worthless, she doesn't exist anymore. In her place is someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who learned the hardest way possible that the only person who can save you is yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, a neighbor who believes you're worth saving. I'm so glad you stayed with me through this story. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can send a small donation. I share new stories every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.